Welcome to Managing Asia. I'm Christine Tan. A new year beckons a new world order. The U.S. has a new president. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is off the table. The world economy is looking uncertain. How are multinationals coping with the headwinds? Today we speak to Achal Agarwal, president of Asia Pacific for U.S. consumer goods giant Kimberly-Clark. The maker of Huggies diapers and Kleenex tissues is stacking up its chips in Asia. U.S. consumer goods giant Kimberly-Clark has added new lines to its $280 million factory in Singapore, producing baby wipes and diapers for export to 11 countries. Asia Pacific is already the biggest international market for the company by revenue. The man leading the charge, Achal Agarwal.
It's very gratifying, Christine, for us to be serving our consumers in a manner that makes their lives better every single day. And that's the real satisfaction that I get.
In the cutthroat world of fast-moving consumer goods, Agarwal is a strong player. Known for his business and people skills, he recently won the station's Asia Business Leader of the Year award.
Most important, leader's only as good as his team.
I think leadership is all about teams, making sure that you set the right direction, choose the right people, support them and then empower them, and most of all winning. So this is the...
Born and bred in India, he first climbed the corporate ladder at ICI, then PepsiCo, before joining Kimberly-Clark.
Success to me is about people achieving whatever their dreams are. So whether it's on an individual level for my team members or whether as a collective that we have certain goals, it is achieving those goals both from a business perspective and also from a personal perspective in terms of career ambition.
How does it feel like to be working for a company big on tissue paper and diapers? Do you claim to know everything there is about diapers and tissue paper?
No, not at all. I think what I'd like to say is I like to understand our consumers better and solve their problems, give them solutions rather than sell products. So it's not so much about the products, it is about giving them solutions which work for them.
But the group as a whole is bracing for more sluggish sales, capped by greater competition and softening demand. Kimberly-Clark expects a continued difficult environment in 2017. Asia, though, remains upbeat.
This region is obviously a growth region. We've got countries like China where you've got 16 million babies on an average. Actually, I was reading yesterday that last year, because of the loosening of the one-child policy, the number of babies went up to about 17.8 million. So that's a pretty big jump, about a 10% jump in terms of the number of babies. And then you've got India, which has got 25 million babies, not to mention other populous countries.
So it's boom time for you?
Well, it's, so long as there are babies, which the world needs, it's going to be great. And this part of the world certainly is where the babies are being born. So we go where the babies are.
Still, the consumer goods business has come under a lot of pressure. Kimberly-Clark last year had to cut its 2016 full-year outlook because it missed that quarter forecasts. How is sales holding up here in Asia Pacific?
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it is that are we serving our consumers well? Are we making sure that whatever our longer-term growth aspirations are we on track? And that's certainly so. And so I don't really think about it from a quarter-to-quarter basis or, what I define winning as that we are giving our consumers what they need and therefore we're gaining share and our long-term aspirations are being met. So that's the way I kind of look at it. And Asia is obviously a very dynamic region. And this is a region which is going to continue to grow and we with it.
Still, there's a lot of global uncertainty. Are consumers more conscious about how they're spending their money?
Yes, consumers, I think, become more and more demanding, which is fantastic because that leads to innovation. So the more that our consumers want, the more it propels us to do things for them, which therefore pushes us to really innovate. And so that's a great interaction which takes place.
Which are your biggest growth markets here in Asia?
The biggest growth market is China. No question, and it's going to remain that for quite a while. I think that's clearly a market which is huge, and it's a market which is growing fast. As I just mentioned, the number of babies are growing, and so clearly China is going to be the biggest growth market. And in the future, I think, maybe at the end of, say, 2020 or so, I think India will take off. India is still relatively small right now, but will take off.
The battle for the Chinese consumer has sparked a price war from rivals like Unilever and P&G. You've got your gloves on?
Well, I don't think about pricing in that sense, other than the fact that we've got to stay competitive. The more important thing, as I said, is that we've got to continue to innovate. And that's what we're doing. And making sure that we're giving products to our consumers which can't be rivaled. And so that's the focus for us, to make sure that we just continue to innovate and give. And China is a market which is increasingly premiumizing. And so we've got to stay with the consumers, and there are different kinds of consumers within China. It's not one consumer. So just being very consumer focused and having the conversation with our consumers through the digital medium now, which is becoming increasingly important.
To what extent have you had to cut prices just to maintain your market share? To what extent have you had to forego margins and profits?
Well, so I wouldn't say that cutting prices means you have to forego margins, because you've got to cut costs too. I think we've been quite successful in terms of, as we've become competitive, more and more competitive, we make sure that we're competitive. We also make sure that we're cost competitive. And innovation is not just about product. Innovation is also getting in the right materials, making sure we get more efficient, making sure that we are sustainable. So doing all those things which actually deliver value to the consumer, and therefore it doesn't have to be at the cost of margins.
What are you doing to improve your cost structure?
Every year we actually report that we have cost programs which take costs out of the system, and it could be as simple as the design of the product. You can have a better design, which therefore leads to lesser waste. We can have different raw materials and packaging materials, which actually can be even better but at a lower cost. So there are various initiatives that we take constantly which are delivering cost benefits, which we pass on to the consumer.
Well, your margins are growing.
Our margins are good, yeah. Our margins are good. Yeah, we don't have a problem with the margin.
Out of curiosity, what are your margins like here in Asia?
Well, I won't give the exact number, but I think they're very healthy margins, and we are a profitable company in Asia.
Here in Asia, you have to deal with currency volatility. Any translation of currency weakness here means a negative impact when it comes to dollar earnings. How are you dealing with the currency volatility when it comes to the Chinese renminbi and the Malaysian ringgit? Does it impact the way you operate in these countries?
It doesn't make any difference in terms of the way that we operate. I think to the point we made earlier, what we've got to continue to do is make sure that we keep gaining share, and that's through more innovation, and so that drives our volume. And the second thing, we've got to make sure that we've got to keep cutting our costs so that we can keep our margins intact. So it actually makes us a better company. So the more, to your point, we've got to deliver in US dollars, which puts pressure on us, obviously, but I welcome that, because it just makes us think harder, and it makes our products and offerings much better. As I said, we've got to do a lot more innovation, both on the product side as well as the cost side.
So, Achal, are you expecting more weakness from the Chinese renminbi? Where do you see the Chinese currency?
It's very difficult, Christine, to forecast currency, and we're certainly not in the game of forecasting currency. All we just do is that we just make sure that we stay focused on what we do, which is, as I said, to deliver great products for our consumers and make sure that we keep being very cost competitive. The currencies will fluctuate, that's for sure, but we don't know where it will eventually land up. And we are vulnerable for not just to the renminbi, but the Korean won, the Aussie dollar, a whole lot of other currencies which are in play. But we really don't focus on that. We focus on the business. Yeah.
Here in this part of the world, there's this huge shift towards online shopping. What are you doing on the e-commerce front? Which countries are you focused on?
So we've got a fair amount of e-commerce in our part of the world, and we've got a very big business in Korea, most of which is now online. Actually, the majority of our business in Korea is online. China has grown extremely fast online, and that's e-commerce. But along with e-commerce, what's happening is that digital is taking off, and our communication with the consumer has changed. So in the past...
How has it changed?
Well, in the past you'd have TV, and so that's a one way of communication. The brand is just beaming out what we want to say, but now it's a conversation. And so whether it's on social media or whether it's different forms that we take on digital.
So a different way to reach out to the consumer.
Oh, absolutely. So it's a two-way street, and we get feedback, and there's a constant dialogue which we engage with the consumer. So we don't think of it anymore as us telling the consumer something. It's about a dialogue. It's about us understanding what our consumers are wanting to talk about, or what is in their minds, and therefore us responding to that.
So what does it mean for your traditional sales channel then?
Well, what it does is that there are two things. So when you talk about a sales channel, then clearly when you go online, what happens is that your business offline diminishes, which creates its own challenges because you become smaller in a retail outlet, right? But then what also is good is that you can bring in a lot more innovation because you can put in SKUs online. There's no shelf space limitation, so you can do a lot more things there. But the other thing besides the shopping channels is the fact that our communication starts to change quite dramatically in terms of that we've got to be very agile in terms of the new forms of communication which are taking place. So we actually bring in some experts into the company who can help us in terms of understanding the new mediums of communication. But some things don't change in terms of that the authentic dialogue that we have with our consumers continues. And I think a company like Kimberly-Clark, we believe in authenticity. That's one of our values. I think it actually serves us extremely well because our consumers then can actually see that we are very authentic and we are there with them.
Don't go away. Up next.
We're going to continue to manufacture in Asia and we're going to continue to expand our facilities. Right now, we're building a plant in Tianjin, which is going to go into production this year.
You have a newly elected US President Donald Trump who has promised to bring manufacturing and jobs back to the US. You don't think this is going to affect your manufacturing strategy and the way you invest here in Asia? Managing Asia, we'll be right back. Back to Managing Asia. This mill in Singapore is one of Kimberly-Clark's most advanced facilities, decked out in the latest technologies to create baby products for export. Singapore has been an important nerve center for the US consumer goods giant. You've set up an innovation lab here in Singapore. What goes on behind the doors of this innovation lab? What amazing things do you try to do?
So what this innovation lab is actually about is to reach out to entrepreneurs in the ecosystem and to leverage their strengths for our business. So typically what we would do is that we would define a business problem and then we would invite some entrepreneurs to say, hey, do you have solutions for us? And then they present to us and then we tie up with them. Now that works both ways because that way it gives a revenue stream for new startups, but it also gives us solutions and we are leveraging all the expertise out there.
So just give me an idea. I mean, how innovative can you get with something like diapers and tissue paper?
Yeah, so if you think about this business, it's less about thinking about the products, it's more about thinking about the consumer. So the innovation which takes place is how we communicate with our consumers. And then when you think about the product itself, you think about as a mother. Motherhood is not easy, as anyone who's been a mother would say, and therefore, if we can make sure that we can avoid the spills and the leaks and the baby can be comfortable and therefore happy, that just gives the mother that much more time to enjoy the baby. Or indeed, we've got Kotex as a brand and it's a woman's self-respect. A woman doesn't want to leak. She wants complete reliability. So we think it's an immense responsibility that we have, and we want to make sure that we fulfill that responsibility to the mother, to the woman, and indeed also with tissue, just making sure that we have products which perform for our consumers.
Any revolutionary product that you have coming online?
Revolutionary is more that we've got to just have products which work. So we aren't in a high-tech space. We're not producing anything which is very high tech, but what we are doing is that we're constantly, it's a simple thing like making the diaper softer. Now that requires a fair amount of technology to make it softer. And while that might not be the most exciting thing to talk about, for a mother, it's vital. Because her baby is comfortable, and when the baby is comfortable, the baby smiles, and that just makes the mother's day, right? So, or preventing a leak with a sanitary pad or tampon, as the case may be. So, I think it's about, there's a fair amount of technology which comes in, but it's not something which is very sexy to talk about as such.
As one of the leading consumer companies with paper-based products, you've come under a lot of scrutiny for not doing enough on the environment sustainability. What are you doing to make sure endangered forests don't end up in your paper products?
Yeah, I think actually that we are recognized as a company which really takes a lot of action on sustainability, and we've got very, very specific targets, whether it's water, whether it's waste, and every aspect. In fact, when last year there was a haze in Singapore, a number of products were delisted in the retail outlet. Our products were one of the products which was not delisted and which stayed on as haze-free products. And so we take this responsibility extremely seriously. And I personally am absolutely committed to the fact that, we as responsible human beings must make sure that we leave a good world for our children. So I take this responsibility personally. And Kimberly-Clark certainly is a company which takes sustainability extremely seriously.
How do you measure and monitor your sustainability efforts? What metrics do you use?
We've got several metrics. We've got water usage, we've got waste measures, we've got energy measures. So we've got an external board which supports us in terms of our sustainability efforts, and we've got some very, very aggressive targets out there which we keep an eye on, and we make sure that we hit those targets. So this is an area, Christine, which I think Kimberly-Clark is just absolutely very, very focused about.
Under your leadership, you've grown Kimberly-Clark here in Asia Pacific to be one of the biggest international regions in terms of revenue. You have operations in about 13 countries. How do you decide what to manufacture in which location? Is it all about access to raw materials and proximity to the end consumer?
No, I think the reality is that many people will sometimes talk of an Asian consumer. There's no such animal.
There's no such animal?
No. I think even within a country there can be different consumers, and we've seen that. So we actually test our products in every single country, and what we do find is that what works sometimes in Indonesia may not work in Thailand, may not work in Malaysia, etc., etc. So we actually tailor our products for the consumer in that specific market, and I think that's a very, very important thing that we do here, because we're not doing one size fits all, and we're making sure that we are catering to consumers in different countries.
So give me an example. For instance, how is a consumer in South Korea different from the one in Indonesia?
So for example, let's take Kotex, right? And therefore we've got a Muslim population in Malaysia, right? And in that country, therefore, many women like to clean the pad before they dispose it. Now, if I just gave them the regular pad that we had, then it would just fall apart when they clean it. But we take into account that since they want to clean it, we have a different design so that it doesn't fall apart when they do it. It's a very simple example. Some countries want thick pads, some want thin pads, some people want thick diapers, some want thin diapers. It really varies, and then there are different elements also that the consumer looks for. Some consumers are looking for comfort, some consumers are looking for health benefits. So we look at each country, we look at each set of consumers, and we then look at the hierarchy of their needs, and we tailor products for them accordingly.
So right now you manufacture in countries like Singapore,
almost all across the board,
Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, China.
Yeah.
How do you decide
Australia,
particularly what to manufacture in these countries?
So that's something which is something we do keep an eye on in terms of cost, and that strategy moves around a bit depending on how the cost moves. So China used to be very, very cheap at one point. China's got a little more expensive. Vietnam is a production base now for us, because we saw the costs in Vietnam are very, very competitive. So while that doesn't mean that we stop manufacturing somewhere, and we still continue to expand our manufacturing, say in China, but we do make sure that we keep in touch with trends in terms of costs, and therefore move our production base accordingly.
But it still is more cost effective to produce here in Asia?
Oh, absolutely. You've got to produce here. There's no question. We're not importing products from outside. We are actually producing our needs in Asia itself, and indeed we do exports. Christine, the best products in the world are in China. That might surprise people, but the products in China are really premium to an extent. It's gone to a certain level where I don't think any other country in the world, other than maybe Korea, is that premium.
So any plans to manufacture more here in Asia in the next couple of years?
Oh, absolutely.
What are we talking about?
We're going to continue to manufacture in Asia, and we're going to continue to expand our facilities. Right now, we're building a plant in Tianjin, which is going to go into production this year.
You know, U.S. manufacturing companies are facing a lot of backlash at home for manufacturing overseas. You have a newly elected U.S. President Donald Trump, who has promised to bring manufacturing and jobs back to the U.S. You don't think this is going to affect your manufacturing strategy and the way you invest here in Asia?
I don't think it's going to affect our manufacturing strategy, because these are not products that we are exporting to the U.S. What we are doing is that we are producing products for our needs out here. And so I don't see that making much impact from our perspective.
Don't go away. More with Achal Agarwal, President of Asia Pacific for Kimberly-Clark, in just a moment.
one of the things which is a passion for me is to make sure that we groom Asian talent for Kimberly-Clark. We've been under-indexed in that in the past. I think we have been remarkably successful now in exporting some of our Asian talent to countries like the US.
Managing Asia will be right back.
Each day, our planet awakens with signs of opportunity. But with opportunity comes risk. And to manage this risk, the world turns to CME Group. We help farmers lock in future prices. Banks manage interest rate changes. And airlines hedge fuel costs. All so they can manage their risks and move forward. It's simply a matter of following the signs. They all lead here. CME Group, how the world advances.
Reaction to quarterly numbers from Alphabet and Microsoft. Plus, after Dow 20K, stocks that could lead the market even higher. Tonight,
we saw incredible shot making and record finishes that sent golf fans into a frenzy. Now it's a fresh start as the race for the 2016-17 FedEx Cup kicks off.
Coming up next time on Gillette World Sport, we get fight fit with WBO heavyweight world champion Joseph Parker. There's the curtain raiser to the WRC season from Monte Carlo. And we check out downhill action with Ben Friant on the snow scooter. It's all coming up next time on Gillette World Sport, this weekend at these times on CNBC Live.
You've recently won the Asia Business Leader of the Year award held by this network, CNBC. How would you define what it takes to be a successful leader in a hugely competitive consumer goods space?
I think of it in a very simple way, and that's what I would say is my leadership style. First of all, you've got to have the right team in place. The reason you've got to have the right team in place is because I believe in empowerment, and you have to empower only those who are capable, right? So the two go hand in hand. The second thing I would say is I like to keep things really simple. With simplicity goes speed. So if you keep things simple, you can move fast. And I think these are the two defining features from my perspective. Making sure you have the right people, empowering them so that they can make decisions locally, keeping things really simple so that you can move with incredible speed. So I think that's the important thing.
What drives you? What motivates you? What keeps you going?
Stories.
Stories?
Yeah.
Like what?
So to me, Christine, life is about two things: relationships and stories. So what I value are relationships, and I frequently say that, you know, I want to make sure that I have enough people at the age of 65 who'll have coffee with me, because at 65 no one cares about you anymore because you don't have a position, you're not so important. But if you've touched someone's life, they will have coffee with you.
You want to make a difference.
You want to make a difference to the individual, and you need to have stories where you look back and you feel good about something you achieved with your team. So those are the two things which make me feel really good.
You joined Kimberly-Clark 8 years ago. Under your leadership, you've grown Asia Pacific to be the company's biggest international region by revenue. How would you define your leadership and your management style? What do you like as the boss?
I've evolved, I think, over time.
You've evolved.
I've evolved.
Also.
But I think the way I would kind of say, the way that I think my team would see me is someone who is invested in them, wanting to make sure that they succeed as individuals, but also us winning as a team.
You have 8,000 staff under your purview in 13 locations. How exactly do you inspire talent and motivate and drive performance within the company?
It's very, very critical who we pick as our leaders. So I am really careful about picking the right leaders in our leadership team, because we've got to be consistent in terms of how we deal with our employees. I can't be there all the time, and our leadership team represents what we stand for. And so
What exactly do you look for when picking a good employee?
Good human beings, first of all. Just, you know, I absolutely want to work only with people who are really good human beings, first of all. And then you look for clarity of thinking, you look for people who have a bias for action. There are a whole lot of things that one would look for. But the first thing I look for is this person really a good human being? Does the person care about the world? Does the person care about people? That's the most important thing first. And then, of course, there are certain skills and competencies.
And you can tell just by talking to them?
Sometimes you make a mistake and then you change the person. That can happen. But I think the track record on that isn't bad. I think I get maybe 85% right. But then when you get something wrong, then make the change.
Looking back, share with us some of the mistakes you've made.
Oh, I've made a lot of mistakes. I think in the past I would say that I was I've always been considered a bit of a tough leader. I could have toned down the toughness. Today I think I'm equally, I don't lower the bar, but I'm a lot more understanding. I guess you might call it that, but I've become a lot more, I think, understanding about people's problems and so on. I think a lot more about people than I used to. So I wish if I could, turn back the clock, I would be thinking a lot more about my team and about my people. When you're young, you're perhaps a little more eager to drive the business that much harder. Not that we drive it any less, but I think you can do both.
You really want people to have tea with you when you're 65, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And finally, as a person heading Asia Pacific for Kimberly-Clark, what impact do you want to make for the company?
Yeah, I think one of the things which is a passion for me is to make sure that we groom Asian talent for Kimberly-Clark. We've been under-indexed in that in the past. I think we have been remarkably successful now in exporting some of our Asian talent to countries like the US. And they are delighted with the exports that we've done. So what I hope to do is to do a lot more of that and make sure that Asian talent is well represented in Kimberly-Clark.
And that was Achal Agarwal, President of Asia Pacific for U.S. consumer goods giant Kimberly-Clark. Hope you've enjoyed the program. Join us again next week for more leadership insights on Managing Asia. I'm Christine Tan. Thanks for watching.